And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian. Thank you very much for joining me this week. We got a pretty interesting week for you guys this week. It's kind of like last week, where there were some noteworthy news items, but it wasn't a big movie news week like other past weeks. So we're going to talk about that. I do, however, before we get to the movie news items, I do want to send my thoughts and prayers to the stunt woman who died on the set of Deadpool 2. That was a really big tragic thing, and I think if you watch your local news or even the world news, it was talked about there as well. And this is on several fronts. There's people saying that production companies and the crews should be more aware, and they should take more safety precautions, and they should. This is happening a lot more. I feel like this is happening a lot more than ever. I don't know if it's because there's easier ways of telling people now that something has happened, but we had the death on the Walking Dead. One of the stunt people died on there as well, and of course there was I think it was a couple years ago where someone died on the set of the last Resident Evil movie. So I feel like, and people are getting injured. There was a lot of injuries on Mad Max Fury Road. I think someone got severely injured there as well, but you can tell by that movie that surely someone got injured on that. But I know there's a lot of people out there who are very skeptical now of production companies and the crew and the stunt teams, and there should be more safety precautions, and there should be. There shouldn't. When you do a stunt, you shouldn't expect to get severely injured or to get hurt. And I have a very profound respect for stunt people and what they do, especially after having the privilege to talk to some of them and to hear some of their stories on several occasions. So I have a very profound respect for people that do that and consider that their line of work, but they know the dangers of going into a stunt, and it is terrible when we hear, of course, someone dying, but it is even more terrible when we know, even though this is something that this is their job, they're stunt people, they know the factors, they know that some things can happen that will affect their stunt, but you don't go in there expecting to get severely injured or worse. But and I know there's a lot of talk on that right now, but at the same time you got to realize this is what they do, and they teach themselves how to not get severely injured. But it is a very terrible thing that happened, and my thoughts and prayers go out to the family and those affected by this tragedy. So that being said, we're going to move on to the rest of the movie news items. So we're going to talk about, as we always do here on the podcast, where we talk about, of course, all the latest breaking movie news. We're going to talk about some of the noteworthy news items that came out last week after the podcast went up. There's only 2 movie news items that came out after the podcast went up last week, so we don't have to get too crazy on that. Paramount has won the bidding war and the rights for a yet-to-be-released book about Leonardo da Vinci. And they've already eyed and attached a star in Leonardo DiCaprio. So Leonardo will be playing Leonardo. So Paramount Pictures won a bidding war for the yet-to-be-released Walter Isaacson's book called Leonardo da Vinci, and they have attached Leonardo DiCaprio to star. DiCaprio will also produce the film under his production banner Appian Way, and DiCaprio actually has a weird history with Da Vinci, because according to DiCaprio's mother, she came up with the idea to call her son Leonardo after the famous Italian, after she felt him kick when she was in Italy looking at a Da Vinci piece. So there you go. Isaacson is no stranger to getting his writing adapted, and even writing about famous people. He's had several books about Einstein, which Einstein actually got adapted into a TV series called Genius, where Jeffrey Rush played Einstein. But his other big project was a book about Steve Jobs, and that book was adapted into a movie called Steve Jobs, which had Michael Fassbender, Kate Winslet, Seth Rogen, and Jeff Daniels, which is terrific. If you haven't seen Steve Jobs, I highly recommend you do. It's one of my favorite movies. Anytime it's on, I kind of always tend to watch it. It doesn't matter where it is. I just tend to watch. I don't know. I really like that movie for some reason. But it's good. But I don't know. There's something about it that just keeps me going back. But anyway, as for the book, according to information released by the publisher, Isaacson used Da Vinci's notebooks to weave together a narrative that connects his art to his science and his curiosity and imagination. And there's a bunch of other stuff that the information goes into, but this is pretty interesting. According to the book, he also Leonardo da Vinci was a misfit, illegitimate, gay, apparently, vegetarian, left-handed, and easily distracted all the time sometimes. So that's very interesting, and I don't know how much of the book will be put into the movie, but we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, things are still in the early stages, but if you want to pick up Walter Isaacson's book, it does come out in October of this year, so there is that. Moving on, Sony Pictures has set, moved, and pulled movies from their release dates. And they're not these small movies. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about a small movie. There are a lot of big movies. So first up, Sony Pictures has moved the live-action Barbie film that now has Anne Hathaway in talks to join. We talked about it on the podcast last week, I believe. That will now be released on August 8th of next year. It was originally going to be released in June, but they pushed it back till August, which makes sense since Amy Schumer was originally attached till she dropped out, and then Anne Hathaway came on board. The Sony Marvel Universe film Silver and Black, which follows Silver Sable and Black Cat, will now open on February 8th of 2019. This goes along with what Sony had intended as for the release dates. Of course, Venom will come out in October of next year. Silver and Black will now come out in February of 2019. That was kind of always the plan. They were going to release these movies months within, I think the reports are 4 or 5 months within each other. So there you go. Sicario 2 Soldado finally has a release date of June 29th of next year. So that film will start shooting relatively soon. The film will bring back Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin, but it will not bring back Emily Blunt's character. So there is that. And they do have a different director. Denis Villeneuve, of course, directed the first film. He went on to direct Arrival and, of course, Blade Runner 2049 that comes out later this year. The new film will have a director in Stefano Sollima. He's directed a few foreign films, and now he's directing this. This isn't too surprising because considering how many times it's moved and they haven't really had anything real story-wise, the third Bad Boys film, called Bad Boys for Life, has been pulled from the release schedule. It had been moved around a lot. I think they had originally given it a January release date, and they were like, no, we're not going to give it a January release date. Then I think they moved it to the middle of the summer, and then they pulled that too, which made some sense. And then they were like, no, we're releasing it on November 9th of 2018, and that was the release date that they had set on. And this was a few months. This is earlier in the year too that they had finally set the release date for this. Not anymore. They have pulled the movie from the release schedule, giving no sense of when it will come out. It's not completely surprising. They've been pushing the release date a lot back. We haven't had any casting updates on anything. Martin Lawrence and Will Smith saying they were game to return, but Will Smith is obviously very busy at the moment. And it just does, I don't know. It's not too surprising. It is a tad disconcerting, but we'll see what happens. A few of the other films they moved, Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly's comedy Holmes and Watson will be released next year on November 9th. The adaptation of the book The Rosie Project will come out on May 10th of 2019. And The Nightingale, which is the directorial feature debut of Michelle MacLaren, who has directed several episodes for Breaking Bad, and I believe she even directed an episode of Game of Thrones, will come out on January 25th, 2019. So, there you go. some release date news. I usually don't like talking about release date news just because it's like, yeah, it's a release date. It comes out next year, 2 years from now. You're not gonna know because sometimes you'll probably forget, or release dates change and stuff like that. So, all right. So those were the news items that came out. The noteworthy news items that came out after the podcast went up last week. Let's move on to this week's news items. And as always, we're going to start off with trailer talk. There was a lot of trailers that kind of dropped this week. A lot of them were like for these smaller kind of movies. So I'm going to talk about some of the bigger ones that came out. You are more than welcome to go check out the trailers down below. We're only going to talk about two of them. I'll briefly talk about a third one, but there's a lot of trailers down below in the description/show notes area if you want to go check them out. Highly recommend you go do that. There's some good trailers down there, but we're just going to mainly talk about two. And again, briefly of a third one. There was a new trailer released for Darren Aronofsky's new film, Mother. And it's basically, if you remember, there was a brief teaser that came out before the first trailer came out last week. This new trailer is basically the teaser all over again with some little tidbits of new footage at the end and some more some text over the scene. So that's pretty much what the trailer is. But the second big trailer that came out this week is the new trailer for A24's The Killing of a Sacred Deer. The film is directed by the Lobster director, Yorgos, I'm going to butcher his name, Yorgos Lanthimos, I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure. I made it sound a little bit more Hispanic than I think I wanted to. But that's what the director's name is, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. The film is being described as a psychological revenge thriller that stars Colin Farrell, who plays a successful surgeon who attempts to integrate a teenager into his family, but when the teen's actions grow increasingly sinister, the doctor is forced to make an unthinkable sacrifice. So that's kind of the basic synopsis of the film. The film co-stars Nicole Kidman, Barry Cohagen, who just broke into the scene with Dunkirk. He plays one of the kids on the boat. I'm not going to give it away who he is. When you see the trailer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But he's in there. Rafi Cassidy is also in the film. She it's been a while since we've seen anything from her. She played the little girl in the film from a few years ago called Tomorrowland. So remember Tomorrowland, the George Clooney movie from Disney? She plays the little girl in that. She's all grown up now. She doesn't look anything like I thought she did before, but yeah, she's all grown up now. Bill Camp is also in the film, as well as Alicia Silverstone. Yes, you heard me. Alicia. Why did I say her name weird? Alicia Silverstone is in the film. So the trailer looks. Oh, I mean, it looks okay. You have. I believe it's Rafi Cassidy's character. She's singing throughout the whole trailer, and we get these little bits of dialogue from other characters like Nicole Kidman and Barry Cohagen's and Colin Farrell's characters. But it's mostly kind of just all these like weird, just all these shots, and it even looks like Rafi Cassidy's character doesn't know how to walk, so she's dragging herself throughout the trailer and throughout the movie. It looks rather interesting. Now, I actually went to go watch The Lobster, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I liked the first half of the movie, and then the second half of the movie dragged way too long for my liking. So I hope that's not the case for this. And A24 has a tremendous track record. So A24 hasn't done a bad movie in my eyes yet. So hopefully this is not that. Hopefully this is good enough, and it does look a little quirky. Obviously, you see Rafi Cassidy's character, kind of just dragging herself, and that's kind of weird and off-putting at first. And you're like, why is she doing that? But then you realize she can't walk, and I guess that's how she gets around. But it just, I don't know. It's the trailer's there if you want to go watch it. I'm very indifferent about the trailer, but it's there if you want to go check it out. So make your own opinion. Alright, so the second trailer we're going to talk about, for me, the big trailer of the week so far, obviously at the time of this recording, is the first trailer for Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut, Molly's Game.
I'm Molly Bloom. Do you know about me? I read your indictment after I got your call last night, and I bought your book.
Do you understand that you are charged with operating an illegal gambling business?
Are you taking me on as a client?
I don't think I can convince my partners to take a flyer on the poker princess.
If you think a princess can do what I did, you're incorrect. I'm getting that you don't think much of me, but what if every single one of your ill-informed, unsophisticated opinions about me were wrong?
I'd be amazed.
This is a true story, but except for my own, I've changed all the names.
Hey, Molly, my weekly poker game is moving to the Cobra Lounge. You'll help run it.
I was in a room with movie stars, directors, and business titans. They were going all in, all the time.
Thank you, Molly. This is for you.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna stop paying you as my assistant.
You firing me?
I'm not firing you. I'm just gonna stop paying you. You get paid once a week from the game. It doesn't seem fair.
You're gonna stop paying me because I'm making too much money doing my second job, and if I say no, I'll lose both jobs because it doesn't seem fair?
You don't have bargaining power here.
You are unimportant.
Do you know how many witches were burned in Salem?
How many?
None. They didn't burn witches, it's a myth. They hanged them. The humiliation had given way to blinding anger at my powerlessness. I wasn't gonna wait before I put a plan in place. I'll be hosting a game in this suite every Tuesday night. First buy-in, 250,000.
That's gonna make noise.
Let's play.
He spent 8 years in Hollywood and 2 years in New York running the world's most exclusive and decadent man cave.
Have you seen the other names in your indictment? Come on, Marty, just how deep into the Russian mob were you?
Your exposure's crazy.
You got 2.8 million on the street right now.
You're gonna get blown up.
You managed to build a multi-million-dollar business using not much more than your wits.
I'm about to be charged in federal court.
Well, nobody's perfect.
There's a new offer on the table. Complete immunity. We hand over the hard drives.
You've seen what's on those hard drives. Families, lives, careers will be ruined.
Why are you in this alone? Where are the people you're protecting by not telling the whole story?
I'll tell them everything they want to know about me. About me. That's it.
Now, Aaron Sorkin is an Oscar winner screenwriter. He's written films like The Social Network, Moneyball, multiple TV shows like The Newsroom and The West Wing, but he's finally making his directorial debut with this. The film is actually based on a true story and a tell-all book by Molly Bloom. In the film, she's played by Jessica Chastain, and she is an Olympic class skier who ran the world's most exclusive high-stakes poker game for over a decade before being arrested in the middle of the night by the FBI. So the film looks really good. It's Aaron Sorkin. I'm a huge fan of Aaron Sorkin. He hasn't done anything that I have not liked, so I'm really looking forward to this. The cast looks amazing. You got Idris Elba in there. You have Chris O'Dowd in there. Michael Cera's in the film. I don't know if he's playing himself or he's playing someone else, but he's in there. And Kevin Costner is also in the film as well. But this is a great team that Sorkin collected, and like I said, this is based off a real person. Molly Bloom is a real person who wrote a book, and the film it's not going to be completely based off her book, because in the trailer you see Idris Elba's character hold up a copy of her book. So it looks like the film is taking parts of Molly's actual life and including parts from the book as well, since the book was a tell-all book, and how she did this and how she created this all exclusive, and who she dealt with. Although she changed it, she even says in the trailer, I believe this is probably a line from the book as well, I've changed all the names of the people involved except my own. And even in the trailer in the film, she says, I'm not giving out my clients, they can deal with me. So I think this is really, really cool. The trailer's great. I love the trailer. I like the concept. I think it's kind of cool. Based on a true story. You got Aaron Sorkin, you got Jessica Chastain, you got Idris Elba. You got a very good release date of November 22nd. So that puts it right in Oscar contention. So maybe Jessica Chastain will get some Oscar love. Who knows? Maybe even Aaron Sorkin will also get some Oscar love. We'll see with that. I really love the trailer. I highly recommend you go check it out. So there you go. All right. Let us move on to this week's movie news items of the week. We're going to start off with some writing news, some writer tidbits. The live-action Naruto movie gets some new writers. Lionsgate is actively working on a live-action adaptation of the popular manga and anime Naruto, and it is currently getting a script rewrite. The new writers are John and Eric Hober, who have written who wrote Lionsgate's previous films, like the action comedy films Red and Red 2, and they are currently, or they actually wrote, I should say, they're not currently writing, they wrote Warner Brothers' epic monster shark movie Meg that has Jason Statham attached to star. So for those unfamiliar with the series Naruto, it's he's basically, from what I can tell, because I don't know anything about Naruto either. I know who he is, I know what the character looks like and stuff like that, but I don't know anything about him as a character. But so from what I've been seeing in the reports, he's a ninja that aspires to be the leader of his village. And just seeing little clips online and here and there, it looks like he gets into a lot of hijinks, a lot of fights and stuff like that. So I don't know how people will feel about that. The film does have a director in Michael Gracie. He is making his directorial debut later this year with the P.T. Barnum musical biopic The Greatest Showman with Hugh Jackman. And by the way, yes, if you heard me say P.T. Barnum, yes, as in the Barnum and Bailey's Brothers Circus. That is the biopic on how he got everything started. So he will be making his directorial debut with that, and he's also making this film as well. So there you go. Like I mentioned, we're going to stick to some of the writer territory. Captain Marvel. Marvel's Captain Marvel gets a new writer. The film was originally scripted by Meg LaFleur. I think that's I never pronounce her last name right. She was one of the writers on Inside Out, and Nicole Perlman, who wrote Guardians of the Galaxy with James Gunn. So they were originally the writers of Captain Marvel. So now the studio has brought in Genevieve Robertson Dorwit to write the script. It looks like Robertson Dorwit was brought in because the writer, I can't pronounce her last name, what is set to co-write the Disney animation movie Gigantic, which is a twist on the Jack and the Beanstalk tale. So it doesn't look like there was anything wrong with the script they wrote. It just came down to scheduling and the fact that she had to drop out and leave. So Genevieve Robertson's Dorwit, I think I still mispronounced that, is rather new to Hollywood. She's rather new. So Captain Marvel will be her third big film since breaking into the scene. She worked on the Suicide Squad spin-off Gotham City Sirens and the upcoming new Tomb Raider film that has Alicia Vikander set to star, which I believe comes out next year, 2019. I actually forget when, but I think they're already done filming, so the Tomb Raider film could potentially come out sometime next year. But anyway, she also has one of her Blacklist scripts. By the way, the Blacklist is a group of scripts that don't have a studio, but are considered good and or great scripts. They just don't have anyone attached to distribute them. So she has one of her Blacklist scripts being developed into a film over at MGM called Ares. Additionally, she's was working on scripts for Sherlock Holmes 3 and the live-action adaptation of Mask. No, not The Mask. Adaptation of an old TV series called Mask, which stands for Mobile Armed Strike Command. Command, of course, with a K, because it has to spell out mask. So look it up. Just look it up. You will not be disappointed if you look it up. So Captain Marvel will undoubtedly be one of her, bigger projects, of course, as well, since she is in the Marvel family now. We don't know too much about Captain Marvel. We do know it will be set during the 90s. Of course, Brie Larson is set to star as Carol Danvers / Captain Marvel. Samuel L. Jackson will play Nick Fury, but it will also feature the fan favorites and formidable villains of the Skrulls. The film does have directors in Anne Bodin and Ryan Fleck. They will direct, with production set to begin early next year because Captain Marvel has a release date of March 8th, 2019. And we're done with the writers, but we're going to move on to some segues, because I love my segues, if they're good. So we're gonna stick to the Marvel bit. Samuel L. Jackson says he is not, I repeat, not, in Avengers Infinity War or Avengers 4.
Say what?
Now, let's face it, not every character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was going to appear in Avengers Infinity War or now shooting Avengers 4, because, let's face it, that'd be crazy. That's just crazy. There's too many characters. But one character that is noticeably absent is, of course, one of the characters that started the whole MCU. Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury. Now, in an interview with Yahoo, which is actually starting to gain some traction because the interview was done before his involvement in Captain Marvel and is only coming out now because The Hitman's Bodyguard is coming out this weekend, he let it known that he was not in those movies, and he sounded a little pissed. So here's what he said. I wasn't in the superhero argument movie, of course talking about Captain America Civil War. I'm not in Avengers 3 and 4, they're shooting them now, and they haven't called me yet. They wouldn't let me go to Black Pantherville, which by the way picked up a lot of steam online. There's a lot of memes on that already. Let me go to Black Pantherville, so it's kind of like, how are you going to make a Black Marvel movie and not let Nick Fury show up in it? End quote. Again, this interview was done before his involvement in Captain Marvel was announced. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't bring up some good points. Like I said, next to Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man Tony Stark and Clark Gregg's Phil Coulson, Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury pretty much started the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. The last time, of course, we saw Nick Fury was in Avengers Age of Ultron, albeit it being a small role, but nonetheless he was there. Of course, they are just starting Avengers 4 filming right now, so the question could become, will they call him in, and if they do bring him in, what role will he play in the movie? The Avengers are fighting, of course, Thanos and his dangerous group of his children, so adding him to the fight could be interesting, but a questionable move, considering that, Thanos and the rest of his children could just flick him off and he'll probably die. Unless they want to kill off Nick Fury and give him a really cool death, then that's kind of it. So I don't know. I mean, again, the interview was done before, so I know there has been picking up a lot of traction, but Yahoo did come out and say this interview was done before his involvement in Captain Marvel was announced. Now, this whole thing about him, not being in Black Panther, I guess that's right. I mean, you're going to have, the cast is pretty much majority, black people and African American people, but I don't know. I mean, sure, you want to add Nick Fury in there? Okay, fine, but what is he going to do there? That's the better question. We'll see what happens if maybe he's cooled down a little bit. We'll find out. Alright, so let's move on to the other news items. We're moving away from the writing territory, but we're going into some novel adaptations. A very different adaptation, mind you. Lionsgate is developing a female-driven adaptation of The Picture of Dorian Gray. How about that? So they're developing an adaptation of Oscar Wilde's classic novel that follows, but for those of you that don't know, Dorian Gray, a man whose self-portrait ages while he stays eternally young. However, what will make this movie different, like I mentioned, is it's going to be female-driven. It's going to have a female character instead of a man. The film will be directed by Grammy Award-winning singer, yes, you heard me, Grammy Award-winning singer Annie Clark. Or, as you probably may know her, or maybe you don't, St. Vincent. This will be I'm just going to call her St. Vincent because that's probably the name that people probably know her as. So this will be St. Vincent's feature film directorial debut. She does have a short film under her belt that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, called Birthday Party, which was part of the female-driven horror anthology film XX. She co-wrote that short, scored it, and directed it. Which, by the way, if you want to watch XX, it's been making a lot of rave reviews around the film festival circuit. It will be available, I should say, on Netflix in March. So you can go watch that, and you can go watch her short that she directed for that, and see if you'll like her adapting The Picture of Dorian Gray. The film does also have a writer in David Burke. He will write the script. He also wrote Elle, which was the film that got Isabelle Huppert some award love last year. He also co-wrote the upcoming Slender Man movie. Yes, they are making. That I don't know what I was trying to say. They are making a Slender Man movie, a real Slender Man movie that I believe will come out next year. They already finished filming it, and he's currently adapting the crime thriller adaptation novel called Alex. So there is that. This movie, The Picture of Dorian Gray, is just now getting developed, so it'll probably be a while before we hear anything on the project. But the idea of St. Vincent directing it and putting a female bent to it sounds interesting. So it's going to be rather interesting to see kind of how how they pull that off. I, for one, am interested in seeing how they do that. So sticking to the adaptation news, Cate Blanchett is in talks to join Jack Black in the adaptation of The House with a Clock in Its Walls. The adaptation of John Bel-Air's book, The House with a Clock in Its Walls, is looking to add a big name, I should say, in Cate Blanchett. Now, Blanchett is currently in early talks to co-star with Jack Black, which already has Eli Roth, yes, you heard me, Eli Roth, set to direct the film. Eric Kripke, the creator of Supernatural, is writing the script, and the novel tells the story of a recently orphaned 10-year-old boy who discovers a world of hidden passageways, magic, and danger in his uncle's old house. There's no word yet on who Blanchett will play, but she does currently have a very busy schedule, so nothing is confirmed yet if she's going to be officially in this movie. Of course, she has Thor Ragnarok coming out later this year. She's currently filming Richard Linklater's next film, the adaptation of Where'd You Go, Bernadette, and she's already filmed her role for Ocean's 8, which will come out next year, I believe. Additionally, she also has the Lucille Ball biopic called Lucy and Desi for Amazon Studios lined up next to film, so we'll see what happens with that. There's no word yet on when the film will go into production, but I assume rather soon, so they're already starting to gather up the cast. This is a weird decision. I mean, Cate Blanchett obviously moving on to doing this seems kind of cool, but if they can get her, it should be rather interesting. I'm really interested in seeing who she's going to play. I think I'm more interested in that, who she's going to play. I don't know. I don't know if I'm sold on this. I will tell you what I'm not sold on: Eli Roth directing it, because I don't really like Eli Roth as a director. It's just, I don't know, there's something about it. The Green Inferno did not impress me whatsoever. It just, it was boring. It really was boring. And the Death Wish remake, which we talked about last week, which the trailer was released last week, I don't know, it doesn't look that good. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe Cate Blanchett will make this movie worthwhile. Alright, let's move on. I believe that ends our adaptation novel news. We're going to move on more to stick to some more casting. Anya Taylor-Joy eyes a reunion with her The Witch director for the Nosferatu remake. So after I'm pretty sure I said this, and I think I even said this after I watched The Witch, also released by A24, by the way. But I'm pretty sure as soon as I finished watching Split and I did my written review on it, I'm pretty sure I said you should start learning or get used to hearing the name Anya Taylor-Joy, because she was going to just explode and start being in a bunch of movies, because she's fantastic. And it looks like she's going to do just that. She's going to be reuniting with a director that pretty much put her on the map. Reports say that Anya Taylor-Joy is in negotiations to star in Robert Eggers' new take on Nosferatu. Eggers and Taylor-Joy, like I mentioned, worked together on The Witch, which actually ended up getting Eggers the Nosferatu remake job, because he said he's kind of wanted always to do that, and he finally gets to do that. By the way, for those of you guys who know what Nosferatu is, the original 1922, yes, this movie is that old, 1922 silent movie followed a vampire called Count Orlok of Transylvania who wants to buy a house in Germany and becomes enamored with the real estate agent's wife. The film was said to be an unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, but there was that. It became kind of its own thing, and it's become its own kind of cult classic in its own sense. The movie was remade later in 1979 by Warren Herzog, and that movie also has some fan following among it as well. So there you go. It's been a while since I've seen Nosferatu. I always watch like these clips online, like these short little scenes, but I haven't sat down in a while to watch the whole film. So, but Robert Eggers, I mean, I loved what he did with The Witch. It was very unnerving. So if he brings that same, again, depending on how he wants to tackle Nosferatu, he wants to make it a full-blown kind of horror thriller, he's the man for the job, because he will do just that for Nosferatu. As for Anya Taylor-Joy, she's, like I mentioned, she's made a name for herself since The Witch, starring in Split. She's going to come back for the sequel to Glass, which is called Glass. It's called Glass, which is a sequel to Split and to Unbreakable. She also starred in the forgotten sci-fi thriller Morgan, which I believe came out last year around this time, and she's currently shooting the X-Men spin-off film New Mutants. So there is that. No word yet on when production on the Nosferatu remake will begin, but when it does, if these two are back together, I think it'll be pretty interesting. Moving on to some more casting tidbits, the Hellboy reboot has added newcomer Sasha Lane. So the Hellboy reboot, like I mentioned last week, is no longer called Hellboy Rise of the Blood Queen. Right now it's only going to be called Hellboy, and it continues to grow its cast. The film already has David Harbour attached to play the titled character of Hellboy. Mila Jovovich is in talks to play the villain, the Blood Queen, the evil sorceress of the film and the villain of the movie. And we talked about that last week. And Ian McShane will play Hellboy's mentor and adopted father, Professor Broom, in the film. Now the cast has added newcomer and breakout star of last year's hit indie film American Honey in Sasha Lane. Lane will play a character named Alice Monaghan. She's a character from the comics, and she is saved by Hellboy from fairies that kidnapped her, and apparently after he rescued her, she maintained and retained some supernatural gifts because of her time with the fairies. So that's kind of interesting. When it comes to Lane's career, she's been pretty busy since American Honey. She's already filmed 2 indie films. One of them is the drama The Miseducation of Cameron Post with Chloe Grace Moretz, and the dramedy film Shotgun with Mancon Monroe from It Follows and The Guest and Marisa Tomei. She's currently attached to a bunch of other projects, but Hellboy will be undoubtedly her next biggest film when that comes out. Hellboy will be directed by Neil Marshall, who directed Dog Soldiers and The Descent. If you haven't seen any of those 2 movies, I highly recommend you go do that. He's also directed episodes for Game of Thrones. He will also co-write the film with Hellboy comics creator Mike Mignola, and aims to be a darker take on the project, with the eyes being looked on for a R-rated film. Production is expected to begin soon. I believe they want to start filming, sometime next month. So we're probably going to be hearing a lot more about Hellboy soon. However, there is no release date given for the film just yet, but if they start filming now, we could be looking at a potential late 2018 release or even a 2019 release date. Alright, so let's move on. Daniel Craig says he is returning for Bond 25.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Now, the question of whether or not Daniel Craig would return to play James Bond has finally been answered. While on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Craig officially confirmed he will return to play Agent 007 in James Bond 25, or Bond 25, as it's being called right now. There's no official title to that yet. When pushed, he said he knew he'd come back a couple months now, and said this, saying, quote, "We've been discussing it. We've just been trying to figure things out. I've always wanted to. I needed a break," end quote. However, for those hoping for at least a couple or maybe even a few more Craig 007 films, he did say that he would be playing James Bond one last time, making Bond 25 his last film, saying, quote, "I just wanted to go out on a high note. I can't wait," end quote. Also, apparently he had been doing a bunch of interviews earlier in the day, and he lied to them, because obviously the question of James Bond had to come up. He lied to them saying that he wasn't going to come back because he wanted to reveal the news to Colbert personally, which I thought was kind of funny. So that's kind of cool. Now, of course, the question of Daniel, I almost call him James Craig. The question of whether or not Daniel Craig would come back was in question, because he made some very strong comments about it and his experience playing the character when Spectre was going to come out. And he talked about that, saying that he had just finished filming Spectre when people were asking him, was he going to come back for Bond 25? And he admitted that he didn't answer the questions with style and grace, his words, and he could have, and if he could have gone back, he would have obviously done that. But I didn't blame him for saying, though. I mean, now that we know this part of the story, I don't blame him for saying that. Yeah, he just finished filming Spectre, and if you saw Spectre, you can see just how massive that production was. And if someone asked me, "Hey, you're gonna come back for the next movie?" I probably would have been like, "You know what? I just finished filming this. Settle the hell down." So I don't blame him for that. I really don't. I don't blame him for that. I don't blame him for. I mean, I blame him for some of the comment. He was very vulgar for some of it. You know, you talked about slitting his wrists with the glass that he had near him when he said that. But yeah, I'm now he's coming back. He's officially coming back. There was always talks that he had one more film in his contract There was talks about possibly him getting out of his contract for the last film, but he is coming back. I'm glad he's coming back. He is a great James Bond, and if he wants to go on a high note, great. Highly cannot wait. Highly cannot wait.
English, motherfucker, do you speak it?
I think I was trying to say two different things. I can't wait for it because obviously Bond 25 is a very highly anticipated movie. There you go. That's what I was trying to say, but I didn't say that. So the Untitled Bond 25 film does have a release date on November 8th, 2019. So this means the film could start shooting, or should start shooting sometime next year. So we'll probably be hearing some James Bond news probably before the end of the year. So that should be exciting to talk about. Alright, so let's move on to our final news item of the day. Again, at least at the time of this recording. So let's move on with that. Lucasfilm is moving forward with a Obi-Wan Kenobi film, and they already have a director eyed for the movie. What? So when the idea of Star Wars spin-offs was first talked about, rumors swirl that they were going to make 3 of them. One of them about Yoda, one of them about the famous and popular character Boba Fett, and one of them was about Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, of course, we ended up getting Rogue One, which was great, and we are currently getting the Han Solo film, which will be coming out next year. But after all these years and rumors circulating, especially last year, Lucasfilm and Disney are in fact now finally moving on with a Obi-Wan Kenobi film. The Hollywood Reporter broke the news, saying the film is still in the early stages and the project has no script, but they are working on it. But that they also have a director in early talks in Stephen Daldry. He has directed films like Billy Elliot, The Reader, and has directed a few episodes, actually more than a few episodes, of Netflix's The Crown. So he's directed that. And before you ask, there is no word yet on whether or not they will find a new actor to play Obi-Wan Kenobi, or if they will bring back Ewan McGregor, who of course played the character in the Star Wars prequels. So I don't know how I feel about this news. On one end, like I mentioned, I really liked Rogue One. I think the Han Solo film is going to be a crapshoot at this point, considering all the problems they had behind the scenes. But also, when you think about it, an Obi-Wan film does make a little sense, because you can tell the story. And this is the other thing. What story are they going to tell? For me personally, if I was going to approach this, I would tell the story of what he was doing between the events of Episode 3 and Episode 4. Because obviously there's a lot of time between those 2 episodes. And Episode 4, of course, was A New Hope, where he was reintroduced after his fight with Anakin in Episode 3. And obviously, I mean, there's the animated Star Wars cartoons and the comics and the books and all that, and they probably, tell the story of what he was doing before then, but I think most people probably don't read those. I mean, obviously the fans read those. I haven't read those just because they're not available to me at the moment. I'm pretty sure if I ask someone, they let me borrow their book. But what I'm trying to say is, most movie fans who get their experience of Star Wars through whether it be the animated TV show or through the movies don't know about the books, or they do know about the books, but they don't read them. So there's that. So I don't know what story they're going to tell. I don't know what approach they're going to do. As for Stephen Daldry as a director, he's an interesting choice. But if he's a good one, if if he had an approach, or they went to go ask him, or if he again had an approach that the studio liked, that Lucasfilm and Disney liked, then more power to him if he can knock this out of the park. I don't know how I feel about it. And again, it's still in the early stages. it will probably be a while before we hear anything real substantial about the project. I know Ewan McGregor has been very open about coming back to do an Obi-Wan film or just play the character again, so who knows, if maybe he'll come back. We'll see. In the meantime, if you were looking forward to an Obi-Wan movie, you can enjoy and embrace the fact that Lucasfilm is finally giving you just what you need. That. Alright, so that's all the movie news items, at least at the time of this recording. I am recording, I feel like I always say this, but the podcast always comes out late anyway. I am recording this a little earlier than I usually do because I am actually going out of town all next week. So I will not be around next week at all. The Facebook page will be going a little dark next week. I will be going completely out of town. I know I have internet service, but it's kind of a vacation, so I don't want to look up too much. I probably will be paying attention to the movie news cycle and stuff like that, but for the most part, I will be on vacation, so I will not be doing a podcast next week. Be aware of that. And yeah, so that's what's gonna happen next week. So that's all the movie news, at least at the time of this recording. If you wanna get back to me on what was your favorite movie news item, you're more than welcome to. You can do that either through a comment down below if you're listening to this on YouTube. Or you can message me on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on SoundCloud, you can message me through there. Or if you're listening to this on iTunes, you're more than welcome to go to my Twitter, to the Facebook, or to the Instagram. They're all linked down below. I got a Facebook for the Facebook page for the podcast, facebook.com/moviepit, but there is a link down below. You guys can go click on that. Give me a like over there. Basically gives you guys a early preview of what we're going to talk about on the podcast. However, I do go more into my own personal feelings on the news here on the podcast than I do on the Facebook page. My Twitter's down there as well, and my Instagram, just random everyday stuff, but just another way to get in contact with me. And yeah, also if you're listening to this, like I mentioned, on YouTube or SoundCloud, there is a link down below to the podcast on iTunes, because the podcast is now officially on iTunes. I would really, really like it if you guys will leave me a review and rating on iTunes. Even if you don't listen on iTunes, even if you listen on YouTube or SoundCloud, I really appreciate if you guys give me a rating and comment over there. It really helps me out on iTunes, and I will read your stuff on the podcast, give you guys a shout out. Yeah, so just go do it. Go do it. And there's a bunch of other stuff down there as well. Like I mentioned, there's the links to the trailers and some other potentially other little stuff that I like that I'll throw in there sometimes. But in the meantime, go check all the plugs down below. My WordPress is up there. I do have a written review of the Hitman's Bodyguard that will be going up. It will definitely be up by the time this podcast goes up. So yeah, go check that out. Alright, so let us move on to this week's releases. We have one limited release this week in Patty Cakes. And the S in cakes, by the way, is spelled with a $. It centers on an inspiring rapper, Patricia Dombrowski, a.k.a. Killer P, a.k.a. Patty Cakes, who is fighting an unlikely quest for glory in her downtrodden hometown in New Jersey. The film is led by Danielle McDonald. I've heard some things about the movie. They've been pretty positive, but I haven't heard too much about it. So the very little I've heard about it, it has been positive. So if you want to go check that out, it is a limited release, so just be aware of that. There is an expansion once again on Wind River, the new film by Taylor Sheridan who wrote Hell or High Water, Sicario. He's making his directorial debut with this. It is getting another expansion, so if you want to go finally check that out. Jeremy Renner's in there. Elizabeth Olsen is in there. It's a crime action thriller. Looks really good, so if you want to go watch it, you can. So there is that. But the two big wide releases this week, the first one is Logan Lucky, directed by Steven Soderbergh, and it follows two brothers' attempt to pull off a heist during a NASCAR race in North Carolina. The film stars Channing Tatum, Adam Driver, Daniel Craig, Riley Keough, Catherine Waterstone, Jack Quaid, Katie Holmes, Seth MacFarlane, Sebastian Stan, Dwight Yoakam, and Hilary Swank. Yes, the cast is jam-packed. The film is set to be very, very good. Steven Soderbergh is finally off his retirement, his semi-retirement, and coming back to filmmaking. I cannot wait to watch this movie. I'm a huge fan of Steven Soderbergh, and I've been hearing nothing but great things about Logan Lucky, so I'm definitely going to go watch it this weekend before I leave. The next wide release is The Hitman's Bodyguard. The world's top bodyguard gets a new client, a hitman who must testify at the International Court of Justice. They must put their differences aside and work together to make it to the trial on time. The film stars Ryan Reynolds, Samuel L. Jackson, Salma Hayek, L.D. Young, and Gary Oldman. I had the opportunity to watch this at a free advanced screening last week, which I did because apparently I don't pay for movies anymore. So I went to the free advanced screening of The Hitman's Bodyguard last week, and I loved it. This movie is so funny. It's fun. It is a fun movie. The story is a little thin, but the chemistry between Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson is just so good. Salma Hayek, she doesn't have a lot of screen time in the movie, but when she does show up, she's just so much fun to watch. This movie, I've talked about this movie a lot. This is the quintessential Samuel L. Jackson movie. He says variations of motherfucker for the whole 2-hour run of the movie. It's just so good. His chemistry, like I mentioned, his chemistry with Ryan Reynolds is so great.
I will bust a cap in your ass.
I said please.
Please, motherfucker! Why are we always yelling?
You know, Ryan Reynolds plays the more kind of straight man, straight-laced character, and Samuel L. Jackson's kind of the more, devil-may-care kind of attitude. It's really funny, guys. It's a fun action movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's very self-aware for some moments. It's a hell of a lot of fun. It's a really fun movie. You want to go have some fun at the movie theater? Go watch The Hitman's Bodyguard. It's just a lot of fun. I really liked it. It was good. It was pretty good. Gary Oldman's kind of wasted in this though. He doesn't really have a big role. He plays essentially the big overarching villain, but he doesn't really do. He's not in the. I think he's even in the movie less than Salma Hayek. I can't remember, but that feels right saying it. He only has one real big moment, and it's near the end. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of Gary Oldman's kind of wasted. But the movie overall is really, really, really fun. If you want to go check it out. All right, so that's it. Hitman's Bodyguard, Logan Lucky, which again is getting really great reviews, and people are saying it's really funny, and I'm gonna go watch that before I go out of town. Those are your wide releases. Another expansion release for Wind River, and your limited release this week is Patty Cakes. So box office predictions, there is going to be none because, like I mentioned, I'm not going to be here next week, so there will be no podcast next week, so I'm not going to give box office predictions, but I was wrong last week on the box office predictions. My picks last week were Annabelle Creations at number 1, or Creation, not Annabelle Creations. Annabelle Creation number 1, The Dark Tower at number 2, Dunkirk at number 3, The Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature at number 4, and Girls Trip at number 5. Last week's actual box office, got all the movies right, got the order wrong. Annabelle Creation was number 1. Dunkirk jumped back to the number 2 position. The Nut Job 2, Nutty by Nature, was number 3. The Dark Tower was number 4, and Girls Trip was number 5. So that was your box office last week. I got them wrong. I got all the movies right, just got them in the wrong order. So yeah. So no box office predictions this week because, like I mentioned, I will be going out of town next week. So there'll be no there'll be no podcast. So there will be no reason for me to give box office picks because I won't be here to talk about the new movies. So next week, by the way, next week it's a really slow week. The end of August is usually really, really slow, and there's not a lot of big movies, so you kind of won't be missing too much other than the movie news. So there is that to consider. But that's it, guys. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I really appreciate you guys listening. Like I mentioned, there will be no podcast next week. And I can't be like, oh, just check out the Movie Pit page, because that page will probably be going dark for a while too. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys this week, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think wherever you're listening to this, whether it be on iTunes, whether you guys leave me a review and rating, whether it's on SoundCloud or YouTube. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys thought of the movie news week that was. What movie you're looking forward toward. If you're listening to this on the weekend, what movie that you already see. Or if you're not going to see any of these movies, you're going to go watch one of the other movies like Dunkirk or Detroit. By the way, go watch Detroit. It's very, very good. I watched it last week over the weekend. Very, very good. Very, very good. A little long, but very good. But it's one of those movies that it helps that it's long. Alright, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Go check out everything down below in the description/show notes area. Go give everything a like, a follow, everything else, a read, whatever, a watch, whatever floats your fancy down there. And I will see you guys in hopefully 2 weeks. Because, of course, the week after will be Labor Day weekend. And I don't know if I will be doing a podcast. I'll let you guys know more on that. But I do think that next week, actually no, in 2 weeks I'm actually, I'm going off on a tangent now. If you remember, there was like 3 weeks where I didn't do a podcast because I had a tooth removed, so I couldn't really do a podcast with my tooth removed. I'm actually getting an implant done, and I believe not the week I come back, I think it's the week after. I really should edit this down, but I'm not going to because I want you to see my pain. Or hear my pain, because you can't see me. If you can't see me, that's creepy. But no, actually, no. I'll figure it out. I'll find out, and I'll let you guys know what happened, what will happen there on my Instagram or my Twitter. So yeah, or on both. But yeah, that's gonna happen. So there may be 2 weeks without the podcast. I'm not sure. Oh, we'll see. We'll wait and see. How about that? We'll wait and see. But definitely no podcast next week for sure. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Have a safe one. I know the world is very shitty at the moment with Charlottesville, and even today I read something earlier about the situation over in Barcelona. If you don't know anything about that, obviously this is a day old, but still, it's a very, very shitty time. It's hard. It's gonna be hard. It is already hard to deal with that. But just stay strong, guys. Just that's my message. That's the moral of what I'm trying to say. Stay strong. Help each other. Don't be an ass. Just don't be an ass. That's my main message. Don't be an ass. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Appreciate it. Have a safe one. Be safe. Be happy. And as always, go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!